The Boeing Company, where I was assigned to the Minuteman program, where I was responsible for the configuration accounting of all the nuclear fleet of Minuteman 1, 2, and 3. And during that period of time, I also learned about incidents involving nuclear weapons. The one incident, for example, was they actually photographed the UFO following the missile as it climbed into space and shining a beam on it, which neutralized the missile. And this was recorded. It was all hushed up, and they split up the team that observed it, but of course eventually the news came out, and it was later published and confirmed it.
Lieutenant Colonel Arnie Arneson was present at a Strategic Air Command facility when one of these objects on radar was seen. He also learned that the intercontinental ballistic missiles were rendered inert during this and a related encounter. His testimony is corroborated by another military official, Robert Salas, who was present also at Malmstrom Air Force Base during an extraordinary event. The testimony of these two men, as well as the supporting documentation, establishes the reality of these objects and that they did have a deep concern with our nuclear facilities. In addition, they demonstrated that if necessary, they could render these intercontinental ballistic missiles inert.
I was a crypto officer for the entire Ramstein Air Base. I was a top secret control officer. And in that capacity, I happened to see a classified message go through my comm center which said that a UFO has crashed on the island of Spitsbergen, Norway, and a team of scientists are coming to investigate it. I do not recall where the message came from, where it was going to, because in that capacity, we were oftentimes told, what you see here, leave here. But I can recall seeing that. The next thing that comes to mind is one that took place in 1967. I was in charge of the Communications Center at 28th Air Division at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. I was, again, the top secret control officer there. I dispatched all the nuclear launch authenticator to the SAC missile crews and whatnot, so I had a very good top secret background to go on. One night, or one day I should say, I happened to see a message that came through my communications center. There again, I cannot quote the date, where it came from, where it was going to, but I do recall reading it and saying that basically that a UFO was seen near missile silo numbers I can't recall, but it was hovering there, and it said that the crew going on duty and the crew coming off duty all saw the UFO just hovering in midair. It was a metallic circular object, and from what I understand, the missiles were all shut down. They were in the missile silos, and they were being, I don't know what SAC does as far as activating a missile is concerned, but it's basically on a standby mode so it can be launched. But when they say it went down, it means it went dead. And something turned those missiles off. And so they could not be put in a mode of launching.
The event, the incident, I guess I call it, is happened on the morning of March 16th, 1967. As I recall, it was early in the morning, and I received a call from my topside security guard, and he said that he and some of the guards had been observing some strange lights flying around the site. It wasn't more than, well, within a few minutes, I'd say, maybe a half hour later. He calls back, and this time he's very frightened. I can tell by the tone of his voice, he's very shook up, and said, "Sir, there's a glowing red object hovering right outside the front gate." He said, "I'm looking at it right now. It's a glowing red object. I've got all the men out here with their weapons drawn." And of course, he was all shook up while he was telling me this. He was very excited. I immediately went over to my commander, who was taking a nap. We have a little cot down there in a rest period. And I was telling him about the telephone call we just received. And as I was relating this to him, our missiles started shutting down one by one. There were approximately anywhere from 6 to 8 that went down, but they went down in rapid succession, which again is extremely rare. And in the meantime, I called upstairs to find out what the status was of this object. The guard said, "Well, the object has left. It just left at high speed." Echo Flight is another squadron, about, I'd say, 50, 60 miles away from our location. But they had the same sort of thing happen. They had UFOs that were hovering, not the launch control facility, but the actual launch facilities where the missiles are actually located. They had some maintenance and security people out there at the time, and they were observed. The UFOs were observed by these people out at those sites. Now, they lost all 10 of their weapons. So that morning, we lost anywhere from 16 to 18 ICBMs. At the same time, UFOs were in the area and were observed by airmen. This incident was of extreme concern to SAC headquarters because they couldn't explain it. Nobody could explain what happened. There is another incident that happened just within a week of this, week after, where there were radar reports and quite a few more witnesses.
So we all turned around, and they're sitting about, I'd say, a half a mile from the tower, and at about 3,000 feet was 3 silver UFOs, sitting in a farmhouse, 2 here, then 1 covering the center. Once they started moving, they went straight up, for a while, and then they went zap. And they was off our scope, and our scope would go out to 260 miles. And so that you calculate that, and that's pretty fast. I called headquarters, and the guy on the phone, he says, I said, "Okay, we got a contact." And he says, "You mean SAC is running a miss against you?" I said, "Not SAC. Not SAC. What then?" I said, "Cosmos." He said, "Wait a minute." He said, "Scramble on your phone." So there's a switch you could throw that scrambles everything with mine. And I said, "Okay, my phone's scrambled. Yours scrambled, mine's scrambled. You taking pictures, taking radar pictures, taking real pictures." He says, "Okay, don't say another word." He says, "I will send a courier up there. He'll get there in about 6 hours. You turn everything over to him." We are never officially ever noted for those pictures that they ever received those pictures. It was just went secret. It went black, like it never happened.
And what we saw were 3 very bright but independent lights. I mean 3 separate lights. We assumed they were independent. And they were in a perfect, I guess, equilateral, a perfect triangle. The curious thing about this formation of lights that caused us to watch it for an extended period of time, 10 or 15 minutes we watched it, was that first it was silent. Second, it was moving slowly, but in a perfectly constant altitude, perfectly constant velocity, and perfectly constant